back to Musto Clay. Today we're going to work on a pinch pot. We're going to talk about getting started and some of the options with regards to how to pinch the form you want. First thing we're going to need some clay, and we're going to have to make sure our clay is prepared right. You've probably watched my wedging and balling video. I know this clay is wedged and I'm balling it. This clay, on the other hand, I want to make the point that you don't want to start with poorly wedged clay, because say, for example, you start with your poorly wedged clay, you see those holes? That's evil. When you go to start to pinch, those voids are going to collapse and you're going to have kind of overly thin parts of your pot. So you want to make sure you've got really well wedged clay to start with. I know I wedged this really good. I'm going to ball it, get into the appropriate form. This is about a pound of clay or slightly less than that, maybe 3/4 of a pound. I like this size for pinch pots because it'll keep them kind of manageably sized. If you get too big of a ball of clay, you're going to have a massive pot. I think for an introductory pot, you want to stick with a baseball size or smaller. At any rate, our first move, once we've balled our clay, is to take our thumb and depress it halfway into the clay. Notice I'm holding it with one hand and moving around it with these fingertips, compressing the wall slightly as I move around. I've only pushed that hole about halfway through the ball, or slightly more. You don't want to go all the way to the bottom. You'll probably blow a hole through it then. So once I've opened this up by moving around, making a revolution or two, to where I can get 2 thumbs in the hole, I can then begin to use all my digits on the outside, and I'm going to begin to compress the wall from the inside with my thumbs moving outward, and then my fingers on the outside compressing inward. So I'm going to move in a very uniform fashion. Notice I'm rolling the pot around. What I'm pinching for is I'm pinching for where it feels chubby, and I'm leaving the thinner parts alone. I'm really only moving 1 millimeter of clay at a time. And the reason being is that I don't want to rush it, and I don't want to compromise the pot in areas. I want to just pinch where it's chubby and just move on to the next spot. And I'm just rotating this pot around and around and around. Notice I haven't depressed any deeper in the bottom. That's still probably about 3/4 of an inch thick. But you can see the form beginning to take shape. Ultimately, we want this thing about the thickness of my finger, be it my pinky or my index finger here. So a uniform pot through and through, walls and floor, all even. That's optimal, all right? So I'm just pinching, and as you can see, I'm rotating around. This can go on for a few minutes. Most people struggle initially. Their pots get floppy, they get uneven. Don't worry about it. You can re-wedge your clay, start again, okay? So I've got some pots here. Same thing. This form, I'm going for a more sort of curvaceous form with a narrower mouth. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my thumb, and it's doing most of the work from the inside. I don't know if you can see that very well, but basically I'm taking my thumb and I'm using it in a manner where I'm sort of polishing that internal wall, okay? And I'm moving the clay outward. So this form, as you can see, is a little different. But that's one way you can approach it. Whereas this form is more about pinching externally in combination with the thumbs on the inside. This one is more about moving the clay from the inside outward and around. This is a little more advanced. Okay. I have some other forms here. This is a little bit more kind of an advanced form of this. Obviously thinner wall. I also took the pot and I sort of pounded it down on the surface, kind of flattening this wall here. It also levels it. That's a technique you can use. You probably also want to level the floor eventually working on the table surface. Okay? You can get into sort of detailed pinching, get that wall nice and even. And again, I'm moving around, making revolutions around the pot, pinching slightly, and coming back to it if I need to. Evenness is sort of the key. I've got a pot here, obviously a little deeper. Again, by maintaining the thickness in the bottom, I can then go back and then compress with my thumbs. I don't know if you can see it. I'm actually physically pushing down into the table surface. And by doing so, I'm widening the plate, so to speak. And I can begin to do that and work methodically across the floor and then up the wall. Again, I want to maintain equal thickness from floor moving up into the wall there. Okay, so this is going to give me a more sort of wide, kind of shallow form. Again, revolving the pot or rotating it, pinching where it's chubby, leaving it alone where it's thinner. This is going to take some experimentation on your part because, again, people will struggle initially and eventually. That's why we'll do a few of these so that you get to where you get some kind of skill and competence with how to move the clay. This form is obviously a little taller. So I've been moving the clay literally from the bottom upward. I don't know if you can see my pinch. I'm pinching internally with my thumbs and then on the outside with these fingertips. I start at the bottom and I'm physically moving the clay upward. I'm drawing it up the wall as opposed to this one where I was in essence drawing it outward and then sort of not drawing the clay up the wall as much as moving it outward. I can get my thumbs internally there and I can move the wall out slightly. I'm not really thinning it much, but every action does thin the pot slightly. Beware of that. That's why you want to take your time. Okay? But I can alter that form by doing so. We want to achieve a nice even form. I would recommend staying away from knives at this point. You don't want to cut it if it's uneven. Something you can do if it is uneven, you can try pounding it slightly. Pound and turn. Okay, you notice that I'll flatten it some. You can then take and pinch and move that clay. Get it even. One thing I'm noticing, I have a little bit of cracking here. A little bit of cracking here. A tiny bit of moisture on your fingertips. Move that around that clay. Again, very little water, but you can seal up those cracks. That's a good technique. You do not want to oversaturate your pot. Do not start spraying vigorously. You just need a tiny bit of water and keep working it around the pot. Okay? If you do develop pronounced cracking, you do want to address it earlier than later. Make sure to fill those cracks and sort of remate that clay. Move it back and forth over itself. Seal up any cracks you may have. Okay? Again, right here, a little bit of cracking. Tiny bit of water on my fingertip. Move that all the way around the rim. And seal up those cracks. So, this is a general overview of some pinch techniques. Sort of the different variety of forms you can create. Make sure, again, you have good wedging, that you don't have voids in your clay. And have a good time.